When we think about making friends and improving our social skills, we typically focus on how to improve the conversation and come off as someone who is socially confident. Get them to talk about themselves, maintain eye contact and good body posture, and ask more questions. But let's forget all of that for a second and try to look at this from a different perspective. Because maybe you've tried all that and you've really done your best to become as interested in the other person as much as possible, but you just can't, and you still have no idea what to say to finally form a deep connection with someone. There's something within your inner world going on here, and it was either concealed deep within you long ago or never given enough attention to the point where you know it exists. This is what we call compassionate detachment, and I feel like the only way that I can really describe this to you is to describe the more intimate parts of myself. If you haven't noticed yet, or if you're new here, you'll see that writing stories has become an integral part of this YouTube channel. Whether they be real accounts of things I've gone through in the past, or completely fictionalized constructions, I have the task of creating and piecing together meaningful words in a way that makes the audience want to keep watching. A task such as this is no easy feat, and even though I still see myself as a beginner, I do know that the most important part of each story I tell is crafting compelling characters. So what goes into a compelling character? Does it have to do with how heroic their acts are, or how well they can handle adversity, or maybe in the charisma of their dialogue? While those can be good characteristics to attach to them, what trumps over all these common character traits is having a strong sense of humanity. By writing a story about someone, I'm able to expose parts of themselves that aren't visible to most people on the surface. I can show you exactly how a character thinks when they walk by their crush in the halls, the subtle shifts in their physiology, and how they kept replaying that moment in their head when they laid on their bed after school. Or how they really feel about that one friend who uses them as a verbal punching bag, but hangs around with them anyway because they want to feel like they belong. We all have these complicated vulnerabilities and tendencies and emotional patterns that every human shares, but we rarely get to see. And that's what telling stories allows me to highlight and reveal: our shared humanity. Let's take, for example, the story behind the movie Fight Club. Our protagonist, played by Edward Norton, leads a typical American materialistic life funded by his unfulfilling job as an automobile recall specialist. On the outside, any average person walking down the street might see him as just another regular dude with nothing interesting to talk about or share. But what the audience gets to see is his inner world, an inner world that we can relate to, that can even help us better understand ourselves. This inner world that we get to peek into eventually manifests itself into the Fight Club that he and Tyler Durden start as a means to exhibit their disgust towards modern society. And it is in that vulnerable moment where all the men are gathered there to punch each other silly and take out their frustrations that Tyler Durden utters his now infamous line.
God damn it, an entire generation pumping gas, waiting tables, slaves with white collars. Advertising has us chasing cars and clothes, working jobs we hate so we can buy shit we don't need. We have no Great War, no Great Depression. Our Great War is a spiritual war. Our Great Depression is our lives.
This line is the line that hits so many young men to their core. It's like we all know how messed up modern society is, but we all walk past each other within the hallways and streets as if no internal spiritual battles are being fought. In real life, few people are willing to pay that close attention to others, and even fewer are willing to pay that close attention to themselves. So the question is, how do we start to see people in the same way that the writer allows us to see them in books, TV shows, and movies? Because surely the key to having any solid relationship with another human being is having a strong sense of shared humanity and relatability. Well, the only way you can really do this is to start to see people for who they are. And in order to do that, you have to know who you are in the most compassionate possible sense. If you do not yet know yourself, everybody you interact with is going to feel like a lifeless robot with no interesting story behind them. After all, your reality is a reflection of the work you've done internally. And in this way, you can only see people as deeply as you have allowed you to see yourself. Within you lies many of these stories. Stories of the one that got away that you were sure would expand farther than just a few meetups and text messages exchanged. Stories of intense bouts of sadness at school, pain from lost opportunities, hope from positive feedback, and triumph. And all of these stories tell you who you actually are. Many of us will try to deny these stories or forget they ever happened, but doing so comes at the expense of never discovering within you why you act and think and react the way you do. The next time you find yourself in the middle of one of these stories, become aware of what is happening. Pay Pay attention to the way the world looks when you are in this story and try to figure out an explanation for it. Let's say you're at work and your boss says something particularly triggering to you, like, no offense, but you aren't really fully capable of doing your job. Most people would react to this by getting internally angry, but not actually saying anything back because that's their boss, and they would just try to suppress the emotion until the feeling passes. But what if, instead, you made a story out of this? A story of real depth. Ideally, you'd write about it immediately, but if you are incapable of doing that, you could start to write about it when you got home on your computer or in a notebook. And maybe you'd end up writing something like this. My boss, with a frustrated look that was even visible through the stack of papers covering half of his face, walked up to me with an intimidating force. When he uttered those words to me, I felt a sharp pain in the region around my torso. A remembrance soon surfaced. I thought back to my childhood, when my parents were overly strict and forceful in their ways of teaching me how to live, and all I wanted was affection that didn't have to be earned. My thoughts surrounded me and shoved words like, you aren't good enough, you'll never be good enough, you don't deserve love from yourself or others yet, right into my face. And in that moment, I finally realized how I had gotten here. I did not actually want to shout at my boss and tell him how much of an annoying ass he was and how he needs to leave me the alone if he really wants me to be better. I wanted to give that younger me what no one up until this point in my life had given me. Just a little love and respect. And I knew I had to be the parent to myself that I never had. Now I can look at my boss a little differently. Was he really upset with my performance? Or did he too have some sort of internal story he was battling with? Perhaps he got to be my boss thanks to his incredible work ethic, which was developed by his peers who never made him feel like he was good enough when he was young. And although I don't believe I should tolerate being stepped on, I can now control my perspective, ease up a bit, and look at him with compassionate detachment. Do you see what happened here? When empathy was employed on yourself and you really saw you for who you are, you started trying to explore it within others, and it revealed to you the avenues with which you could start to connect with this person on a deeper level. When I see people in my comments section talking about how happy they are being alone and having zero friends, and how they think most people are boring and are genuinely bad at heart anyways, I don't see someone who has the right objective view on humans or someone who doesn't belong in the world. I see someone who has only been able to see the bad in people since they were young, because everybody has treated them poorly since they were a child. And they are using those phrases as a defense mechanism so they don't get hurt in the same ways that they did in the past. This type of perspective is not something you can just naturally have out of the blue. It's taken me many years of using this YouTube channel as almost a sort of open diary to myself, as well as reading about what really makes a good story using book summaries, which can be found on the sponsor of today's video, Shortform. If you aren't familiar with Shortform yet, it is a platform that is producing the highest quality guides to nonfiction books. They summarize all the book's key concepts and ideas clearly and simply explained, plus they give you a little smart commentary and analysis while you're reading through these summaries. And my favorite part about Shortform is the fact that they have exercises to do with each book. I love that you can apply what you are learning directly when you are learning it, because otherwise it's just a bunch of knowledge in your head that you're not actually doing anything with, and you're probably going to lose that knowledge after a short while. A book summary on there that has helped me craft stories on this channel, as well as the story that I just told in this video, is Story by Robert McKee. And in it, McKee explains why stories are so much more powerful than facts, and just looking at everything from a very bland cause and effect point of view, and goes over the key elements of a story that get us to evoke emotion. 3 genres I think you guys would really like are communication, relationships, and self-improvement. So if you want access to thousands of book guides for the price of just 1 book a month, you can go to my unique link, shortform.com/Cole. That's also the first link in the description, and that's going to give you a free trial for unlimited access, as well as 20% off their annual subscription plan. So go take advantage of that offer right now. Shortform is my favorite book summary platform. Now let's get back to the video. Now, this type of practice that I outlined doesn't have to be done just with other human beings or when something difficult or unfortunate happens. In fact, you can find stories like this within the most mundane parts of everyday life. I mean, really look around at what you are experiencing right now in this moment. The carpet you are touching with your feet, the structure of the buildings that surround you, how each individual grass petal follows the wind, but in its own way, and the subtle ringing that's ever present in your ears. Everything you interact with on a daily basis has a story behind it, with more details than our conscious brains usually allow us to perceive. And when everything has a story behind it, it evokes meaning and emotion out of everything you see and do. Then, the rest of the world looks a bit more brighter, a bit more hopeful, and a bit more worth exploring. And that includes people as well. By saying this, I am not implying that you should only look for the good in people. In fact, I often encourage you to look for the bad. But what I mean by that is that you should look at what stories this person has had to carry and bear, and how that's developed both the positive and negative parts of themselves, just like how those parts have developed within you. And then you meet those parts with compassion instead of ignorance, anger, frustration, or dismissal. Because of all the work I've done to expose myself and really see myself for who I am instead of who I wished I was, and because I've been to those depths, I no longer see people as just ordinary, average people. I see everyone as having their own story. And somewhere in there, maybe we can both touch the same point of reality and realize, hey, we are both really here, doing this very strange thing we call existence the best we can. When I do this, I realize that feeling like I'm alone in this world and that no one understands me is just what it looks like on the surface. I can look at every living thing and recognize that they are an independently operating part of the whole, doing their best to survive by unconsciously creating the stories that best reflect their current inner state. And I can potentially bring out their best stories, the ones that they've been hiding from or have been waiting to share, so long as I can develop the ability to pay attention, listen, and guide the conversation to a place in which our stories can collide and we can experience our shared humanity. And sure, maybe there might actually not be much for you two to relate to each other with, and you won't get along because you've had vastly different lives, or that person hasn't done enough inner work themselves. But as long as you go into every social interaction with this mindset after having done your own introspective work, then making friends, feeling alive, and having empathy for every being on this mammalian plane of existence we all occupy and journey through will be far easier for you to implement. So start to pay attention to your own stories and meet them with compassion. And pretty soon, you'll start to see the stories of people that were never told. Thank you very much to all my patrons on Patreon. If you don't know what this is, it's a platform separate from YouTube where I put out exclusive content. You want to check that out, link in the description. And if you want more advice, specifically like more communication advice and how to handle yourself in a social situation, just how to improve your social skills, I have a whole playlist right here that will help you a ton. So go check that out. And now I'm leaving. So I will see you guys. Peace.